All right, all right. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. I am your host, Emmanuel Dion, and I have some very special guests here with me. We've already started chatting backstage a little bit. I have my beautiful mother and my father. How y'all doing tonight?
Doing
Doing
great,
well.
doing
How are
great.
you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. And I appreciate y'all for coming on, especially seeing that I know that it's been a long day and it's 9 o'clock at night. But on tonight's episode, what we're diving into is move out at 18. Is it a freedom or failure plan? Now, speaking from my personal experience with this, um, you know, well, speaking from a overall standard, we're dealing with real issues. The world keeps pushing this idea that once you turn 18 or hit your early 20s or somewhere around there, 16, 20, 17, you need to get right? Out of the house and you need to prove yourself. Or if you don't if you don't personally if you're not personally told to get out like me, I was never told to get out, but I did feel a pull to the according to the societal pull that was on me. So so but what are we really promoting within our society? Responsibility or separation from correction. For me, it was more so I didn't want to be corrected. I wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do, who I wanted to do it with, and that was it for me. So when it comes to society, we're going to look at whether it was readiness or rebellion dressed up as independence, because a lot of people are not leaving home to build; they're leaving home for permission, permission to indulge, permission to move without accountability, permission to serve desire, and on the other side, many parents never laid down the principles needed to protect their children from that kind of thinking. So tonight we're dealing with the house, we're dealing with the culture, the young adults, and we're going to deal with data. And of course, I always go into the patterns and I always go into some type of uh, Torah principles because I think is vitally needed. So a lot of times people hear a topic like this and they think is just maybe theory. But many of us have watched this play out, or we have our own personal testimonies of it. We've seen people leave too early, leave for the wrong reasons, leave unprepared, or stay home and still never be trained. So I want to hear from each one of you all and what you all have seen or experienced for yourselves. Ladies first. What has been your experience with people moving out too early? Was that something that you had to deal with, or was that something that you actually witnessed? And I'm pretty sure it was to some extent, right?
Yes, for sure. Um, thinking back when, at that age for me, um, which I don't ascribe to just because you turn 18, you really just going to the next level. You should be going to the next level, making decisions on the foundation you want to build for your future,
Right,
being in a trade school
right,
or going on to college.
right,
That's definitely not an age to try to go out and live as a full grown adult because you're not even able to support yourself.
right.
So, I think that at 18, yes, you should be given, some responsibilities, showing that you can be accountable, showing that you can be responsible,
Hmm.
um, and then additional, you get additional, um, or you get more responsibility. Let me say it like that. You just get more responsibility the more you can prove yourself responsible. So for me, my parents, they didn't talk about getting out at 18.
Mhm.
Um, all of my siblings over me um, were going on to college, uh, going off to school. Um, I didn't go away to school, so I was still at home,
Mhm.
still going, pursuing a higher education, going to school part time, working part time, which I did try to move out and roommate with my girlfriend, but that was very short lived, you
Mhm.
know. And my parents were not like, if you leave, you got to stay gone and all of that.
Mhm.
So it was always an open door. Always you were welcome to come back home.
So so in your experience, do you think that you probably left prematurely, or what has been your experience with seeing people leave home too early?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because number one, you're not mentally ready. You're not
Right.
emotionally
Right.
mature enough
Right.
to just be out there responsible for yourself
Right.
without a covering. You still
Right.
need, definitely still need that covering. You need the mentorship and all of that
Right.
because, it's a new phase in life for you. Because I remember my goal for T Renee, your sister,
Mhm.
was I had a checklist
Mhm.
and I wanted her to know how to cook, how to clean, how to
Mhm.
balance her checkbook, how to have a savings account.
Mhm.
I had a whole list of things that I wanted for her to do prior to her leaving, to
Mhm.
live on her own.
Mhm.
Um, it was a little different for me because I was a teen mom.
Mhm.
So I wasn't on my own. I was working, still living at home. Um,
Mhm.
and I stayed at home, until I married your dad. I was still living at home.
Mhm.
So, but I have seen
So
young people with
what age did you leave? What age was it that you moved out?
um Ferris, how old were we? 23?
Okay.
I think I was
Yeah, 23,
23 when
24, something like that. Yeah.
uh-huh. And
Yeah.
that's when I moved out when I got married.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even at that age for many of us, because I know I moved out at 21, I believe. But a lot of us move out not because, speaking from my experience, not because we're ready, is either the circumstance has become um unbearable for us, we want an escape, or in my case it was the fact that I just did not want regulation. I
Hmm.
wanted to date who I wanted to date. I wanted to come in when I wanted to come in. I wanted to do all of those things that, had I been in a house, probably would have had been regulated. But instead of disrespecting the house, I
Hmm.
thought, because I didn't even I already knew not to bring those problems to the house. So it was
Hmm.
never an issue with me when I was there. It was never an issue, but I knew I wanted to get out because there was this unchecked way of wanting to be that I wanted to live out, and that was it. It wasn't. I didn't plan anything.
Hmm.
I didn't plan a life. I didn't plan what I was going to do or anything. I just knew that I wanted to have a good time, and unfortunately, that's many of us. Whether even if the reason is going to school, right? And this is where I kind of push the line a little bit, because within the culture, we're taught that if you're going off to college, well, sometimes going off to college, you're still not really equipped to be able to handle all the wows and the decisions of the world that come with you, that come with
Mhm.
it. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's used as a Trojan horse, if you will, to really disguise the real motive in what you want to do. And we know that many people go to college, um, and they first few years they just party like crazy. They're kind of living out and expressing that wild side of themselves. uh,
Mhm.
but go ahead, Ma. You were telling me about, you said you moved out in the early 20s. So how do you think that, in your experience, what are the um well, how do you think that you were really set up and ready to transition into that life? And if not, like, how do you think that you know I'll leave it right there. Do you think that you were ready to actually make that transition?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Um, because I had given my life to Christ,
Right.
and I was, my mindset was, I wanted to live a life pleasing to God.
Mhm.
Um, and my mother had taught us, you don't move out and go living with a man and all of that. That was total 1000% taboo,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
So, um,
If you was gonna do
I
it,
felt that
if you was gonna be with them, you had to do it right.
exactly.
I
If you was
understand.
going to be, I mean, as far as coming to the house, talking to my dad, asking for my hand in marriage, uh, even though I did not have that kind of relationship with my dad.
Mhm.
And my dad didn't even require it, but I
Mhm.
required it.
Yeah.
It was my standard, you know. So, but now I think that, uh, and it's different. It's not a cookie cutter kind of standard or decision for every child,
Mhm.
because some children are more mature than others, some children are more responsible. Um, but for the most part, the parents, it's hard to just cut that cord.
Mhm.
They may have, you may just have to give them a little bit at a time. That's why some parents want their children to go start off at a community college,
Mhm.
or, to go to school somewhere close by versus just going away out of state. And then again, at that age, little by little, you have to begin to prepare the child and talk to them, um, and just be very upfront,
Mhm.
when it comes to talking to them about relationships, interaction with the opposite sex, how to carry themselves, because sooner or later, what you've instilled in them will now it's time for you to see or to enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Mhm.
What you've
Yeah.
put in that child is now it's time to show what they've really absorbed and what they've really learned, or were they just saying yes ma'am, yes sir, because they knew that was the right thing to say and wasn't paying attention to nothing you were saying, and having their own mind, were going to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at that age, a lot of teenagers get rebellious, but that's been years ago. I don't, I'm not around any young people. I don't really be exposed a whole lot to that age group. But
Well, what I
yeah,
what
I
what I can
I
say.
think the
Go ahead.
children even now, they definitely shouldn't be trying to leave home at 18. I think it should probably be all the way up to 21.
Yeah, I give it more time than that.
because the world has changed so much
Yeah,
since you were, 18 or 19.
yeah, yeah. Like the old saying goes, "There's nothing new under the sun." We we've experienced it, and we know how this development goes, and so
Hold
um,
on.
can you hear me? Can you hear me, Dad?
Yes, I can.
Okay, okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, okay, gotcha. So we know how this goes. If I were to do it over again, I would stay up until I was married. Pretty much if I could, and practice group economics. Contributing to the household. It just makes everything a whole lot easier when everybody's grouping their finances together, and we see a lot of other nationalities of people do that. Us as a people, we don't practice that as much. Not to say that we don't,
Hmm.
but it is not a cultural norm for us. And of course, we can look at the past and say, it's been conditioning over time, but and which is true, but the fact still remains that it's still the truth that we don't. It's not something that we practice. And I want to go over to Dad real quick, um, and ask the same thing, and if you could tell us what your personal experience was, and then we can kind of go into some of the same questions. I can repeat some of the same questions that I asked Donna Ruth.
I think that mm, when people leave at age 18, most of the time it's probably strictly out of rebelling against household rules, as
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
had kind of, they just don't want, because there's absolutely no other reason to move out. You don't have the finances, you don't have a lot of
Hmm.
things. Uh, you don't have, probably don't even have a decent job, but you have adult freedom. And as soon as it's acquired, you want to use it. Um, on the flip side, the parents that put this kid that, and I say kids are young, because they're not quite adults,
Hmm.
because let's face it, they just walked across the the graduating floor. They just graduated from high school.
Hmm.
They just
Hmm.
got their diploma that they're waving. So now you're saying you just graduated and I want you out. You can go get a job and you can go do this on your own. Now, why are you being put out? Could be for a number of reasons. My own personal story is I was pretty much told uh, before graduating that when you graduate, have somewhere to go. And I'm thinking like, man, that blew my high. And so I that's how it used to be a military recruitment place down the street. And I was walking by, and for whatever reason, I walked in just out of curiosity.
Hmm.
It was a storefront, and the guy talked to me, and he told me that, hey, when you graduate, you'll have a place to stay, and we'll take care of your housing and all of that. And I'm thinking, like, that's the solution.
Hmm.
That's what, because at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm thinking, like, wow, okay. What did I do? I didn't have a car.
Hmm.
I had some money.
Hmm.
Um, but but even that was being used for adult things. In other words,
Hmm.
my parents were borrowing from me.
Hmm.
So they're adults and they're looking at my income and they're thinking like, oh yeah, loan us this for loan us that, loan us that. So I never, I wasn't prepared for college. I wasn't prepared for moving out. I wasn't prepared for anything.
Hmm.
If it had not been for the military, I may have been the guy standing on the corner with a cup,
Mm,
you know, selling some flowers, or just washing your windshield,
right.
or
So
or mm,
let me ask, why do you think that? What if you were to unravel the onion, if you will? If you were to look at like why your parents, like, where do you think your parents got that thinking from, or I'm just curious, like, have you ever wondered where that mindset even like came from?
uh, over time, considering I'm quite old, yes. Uh, but it all boils down to a condition of the heart.
Mm,
You can, in other words, the way that I look at it is my job is to support your dreams. Your dreams may not be achievable until you're 28, but if you're out there putting forth progress, making strides towards it, then I know you will achieve your goal. And the one thing that you absolutely need is somebody that you can absolutely 100% trust and depend on and know has your back. Because
mm,
Mm-hmm.
you can't say that for everybody, but you can say that, or you should be able to say that for your parent. Uh,
mm,
so it's important to have to support your dreams. And everybody's dream is different. Some is going to be the 4 years of college and then something else. Some are going to be this, that, and the other. My dream was, with all the money I was saving, this area was relatively new, and there was lots of land for sale. I wanted to buy investment land. That money got borrowed away from me.
mm,
Mm.
So, and I'm trying to, and and I even had money borrowed away from me by my parents to give to a sibling more than once. Uh,
mm,
so, and then even after coming out the military, it was like you've heard of the revolving door. I
mhm.
was kept getting a slam. I kept getting a slamming door. Yeah, it kept slamming on me. Like even though you were welcome, you still weren't welcome. In other words, um, people have this habit of saying, I don't want them to get too comfortable because they may stay too long. But
Mm.
Mm, yeah.
when again, when it's that same person, which is the only person that you can rely on, that you know, that you think that you're, I guess you could say, biologically engineered to think you can rely on,
Mm-hmm.
then that's like that's like trying to run in quicksand. You're going absolutely nowhere, and you're getting there
Mm-hmm.
faster the faster you run. So with my experience, I look at it like uh, you know when the old people used to throw the kid in the water, and you're either gonna
Mhm,
sink or swim, sink or
mhm,
swim. So I kept getting thrown in the water until I started swimming.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, you know, uh, you- it doesn't mean that you learn to swim well. It does mean that you learn to survive.
Mm-hmm.
right,
And that's
right.
the lesson I learned. I learned how to survive.
Right.
And with that lesson, I have walked away from jobs that I know coworkers or other people would not do because they do not know how to survive. And out of somewhere, I just have the wherewithal that, and and I can't just say always the wherewithal because you realize we have that little picture of people walking in the sand, and then they look back and see two sets of footsteps. Well, God carries you a lot of
Mm-hmm.
those ways. Well, really all of those ways,
Hmm.
that whether you have faith or all the time, but you have trust all the time. And, can't say that I'm perfect, but uh, I've learned to, I've learned a lot. Um, have I achieved where I want? In other words, if I had not moved out at 18, where would I be? Had I had someone there that was always saying, "Hey, you can do it. I got your back." And you don't have to use those words, "I got your back," but you, it's understood
Mm-hmm.
they have my back.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's an understanding that they have my back. So um, you can go out there and you can run until you have it. You can run until you fall, and guess who's there to make sure that you get back up? Because uh, that thing that we say about uh, the prayers of one versus the prayers of two, and
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
it also works with the efforts of one versus the efforts of two.
Right.
Just having that person that's always there. So moving out at 18, to me, it's almost another little analogy I thought of. It's like um, you have a race. You're in a race car,
Hmm.
and your tires are on flat.
Hmm.
Well, guess what? You can finish the laps, but you ain't gonna finish it fast. You
Right.
might finish last at the
Right.
most with
Right.
low tires. You can keep the engine running. You can keep doing that, but while you look over there at your peers, they're zooming.
Right.
You know,
Right.
they're firing on all cylinders,
Right.
and you're right there just putting along. Waving like you winning, doing the wave. You
Right.
know, so I think that it's uh, today. I think that people understand. One of the things that does happen is, as a parent, you try to correct or make sure that the issues that you dealt with, that you do not pass on. You learn lessons from that the
Mm-hmm.
next generation benefits from,
Hmm.
because you say, "I
Right.
certainly don't want this for my child. I would never do this to my child." And that's what happens with those who have gone out at 18, or in the sense of being put out. And I think that even those who leave on their own at 18, they have a different approach to their child, in telling them and giving them a different direction and different advice and different understanding of what it is like to do that. And in my case, I approach it as in, I'm going to show you how to do some of these life things, how to go about doing this and doing that. And you hand over more and more responsibility, because let's just say they are now adult toddlers,
Hmm.
and you're gonna r- keep them going until they can run on their own.
Hmm. Right. Right. Absolutely. And I appreciate that. It sounded like, I have a very, I think this is what you were alluding to. This is Romans 8 and 28. It says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who care, to them who are the called according to his purpose. And then we have the base from which that comes from, which is the Torah in Genesis 50 and 20. It says, but as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to
Mhm.
pass as it is this day to save much people alive. And so that's what it sounds like the experience, where it was meant to keep us down or meant to be stumbling blocks for us. It may have operated in that faction on some points, but it was the mercy that kept pulling us up, pulling us out, and allowing us to kind of refine the process. So when we're looking at the next generation, we can help pass along some of that information. This is a big one too. And when I was asking, these are things that just came to my mind when I was asking about our heritage, and I've kind of made a couple of points to that. And we reflect this very well. This is Jeremiah 17:4. It says, "And thou, even thyself, shall discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not. For ye have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever." And when you look at what we're dealing with, we're trying to kind of piece the puzzle together of looking at our of heritage, of having a foundation, because many of us have just kind of been cast out there and just told to fend for ourselves, or if that is not the case, um, we kind of feel the pull from society. And if one thing that I learned about desire, if you don't learn to regulate it, then you will only learn to obey it. And that's where it falls at. If you don't learn to resist it, if you don't learn to recognize it, or distance yourself from it, it's only a matter of time before you learn to obey it. I want to go to some of the people in the crowd right now, just kind of highlight some of the things that they've said from their testimonies as well. Nikita Journey says, "I moved out for school, but the school was driving distance." Right. So she says she moved out for school, but the school was driving distance. So my dad wanted me to stay home, but I just like the idea of what I thought would be freedom. But I wish I had listened. Right. And that's huge. And many of us fall on that portion of the spectrum. I want to highlight something here. This is Exodus 20:12. It says, "Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee." So a lot of us, we think that what we think as young people is higher than our parents for some reason. That's kind of how we all I think everybody goes through that. Mr. Playmaker, and what's up, y'all? What's up, Mr. Playmaker? Shalom. It says, "Pops told me and my brother we could stay until we were 30 as long as we took care of business. We appreciated it, but we took off and the door never was closed." So he said his pops gave him until 30, right? In order to do it. So here, I want to just pause this right quick, and I want to go to another testimony right here and just play a short testimony clip, because the issues are bigger than just the households that we're dealing with, or the households in the crowd, and be able to get some opinion on it. I'm gonna go ahead and play this real quick, and we'll all be able to listen to it and kind of chime in on it.
Take care of your parents no matter what. But my mother left me homeless when I was 17. Not struggling, not barely getting by. I mean, completely homeless. One day, she packed up everything that mattered to her. Then she ran off with another man to start a new life. And she made that clear. She left me and my siblings sitting in an apartment in a project waiting for the locks to get changed. I remember the last day she came back to get the rest of her stuff. She looked at me directly in my eyes and she asked, "So what you finna do?" And I stood there hoping my mama would say, "Come with me," but she didn't. She grabbed the rest of her stuff, walked out the door, and left me right there. 17 years old. No plan, no guidance, no mama, just the streets. So I took it to the chin. I slept wherever I could sleep, pillow to post with my baby mama. Eventually, I got a job. At 18 years old, I got my own place. And I started building a life for myself. I became the man that nobody invested. 10 years later, my phone rang. "Hey, son, it's your mama." She had just been put out. Now, she needed somewhere to stay. And I had it, I had the space, I had the money, I had the resources. For a moment, my heart wanted to say yes, because that's my mama. But then my memory kicked in. Flashbacks of being 17 years old, standing outside that apartment, watching my mama walk away. So I told her, no, mama. And I reminded her, you remember when you left me homeless? I had to figure it out. And I told her, you have to figure it out just like I did. And would you believe she hung up before I did? And I'm not gonna tears because denying your own mother somewhere to stay.
It sounded like it was chopping up quite a bit on my end. Was it chopping up for you all too?
Some.
Okay. Okay. So I'll give a summation of the video because I'm not sure how it was received on you all's end. I know it was chopping up like crazy. Mr. Playmaker said it was chopping up pretty good on his end. So basically, what is that what you're saying, Mr. Playmaker? I think that's what the yes was for. But basically, this clip is saying that at the age of 17, right, his mom was there. His father had left out already, so it was just his mom, right? And his mom walks in, 17 years old, and she's gathering her stuff. And all right, thank you, bro. And okay, T Renee, hey sis, she said we heard most of it. She said, okay, the most important parts were clear. Okay, cool. So I think we got the most important parts of it. The cap is mother left, 17, left him, abandoned him, and he was left there. So he was left to fend for himself, homeless, or whatever the case may be. Now, years later, mom calls him up and says, hey, she needs a place to stay. And he remembered what happened prior to. And even though he wanted to give his mother the ability to and open the door for mom to come back in, it just wasn't something he could do, so looking at this experience here, do you all, what is your thought process on it before I go on asking any questions? What is your thought process on this clip? You think he was, you understand where he's coming from, think he was right or wrong or whatever the case may be?
I think that it's always something that is between him and her.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, 10 years of time has gone by and they haven't hashed out anything. And she calls out the blue and she needs help. Um, that is on a very personal level. And the thing is that uh, when people mistreat other people, the mistreater can't just walk up to the other person as if nothing has ever happened, because the person that holds the knife is
Mm-hmm.
not the one that feels the pain. They're not the one that feels the pain. So
Right.
it has to be something there before you just say, hey, I need a place to stay.
Right.
Because he did remind me in my one thing I left out was I signed up for the military when I was 17, and the way I signed up, they had to come to the house to get permission, and they had to get parental consent.
Mm-hmm.
So when he's talking about 17, I can understand the I can understand dealing with a certain level of and I hate to say it this way, but a certain level of cruelty.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never really something that just goes away unless you have to find it somewhere to have some degree of forgiveness. Because trust me, He didn't just have to, he didn't remember. He's always remembered. It eats at him
Right.
because that is a betrayal from a parent to a
Right.
child with
Right.
an expectation to be a parent at least until that magic number of 18, at least until he is capable of doing something on his own. So
Right.
that is the ultimate betrayal. Nobody forgets that.
Right.
And nobody forgets cruelty. However, cruel people tend to forget or act like everything's okay. They'll walk back into your life tomorrow after they did something to you today.
Mm-hmm.
So that parent child dynamic wasn't there.
Right.
And a lot of times when people move out at 18, you know, it may not be as bad, as severe as that is, but there's some brokenness in the relationship. That's what I would think.
Right. Right. Totally understand. I do agree. I agree with your points that you're making. And before we go to you, Mother, we have I highlighted a couple of people's stuff, but I just want to go back to them and read them real quick. Playmaker said, "I don't think you have to understand. There's parts of the story that we don't know." Right. And I agree with that. I do agree with that. I think that there has to be some level, like if in order for a relationship to be mended, there has to be some level of accountability, right? Otherwise than that, the trust just isn't established there. You know, the same thing can be a repeating process. That's just from what the parts of the clip that I heard. T. Renee says, I think the clip gives a small part to the story. Was he obligated to offer her a place to stay? We can't say. It sounds like a layered, complicated relationship with his mother. Definitely sounds as though that is the case. Simone says, I agree, Playmaker. We don't have enough details on the story. However, I could tell he felt betrayed by the person who's supposed to love him the most. And there's one more here. It says, yeah, that stuff hardens your heart if you don't forgive and spills over it to every other relationship around you. Absolutely agree. I agree with every statement that has been made so far. It does have to be forgiven. What I would say as well to add to that a layer of it is that that he probably he could have, hypothetically he could have forgiven her. It's just that he doesn't trust her to inhabit his space like that. And Mother, definitely, want to hear from you if you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Yes, for sure. I feel like at that moment he probably was dealing with some real serious mixed emotions,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and all of those unresolved hurts and wounds from
Mm-hmm.
that big span of time just came in and took over,
Mm-hmm.
and that was just the human side of him,
Mm-hmm.
because at that point she he may have processed her more as an enemy or an adversary versus a mother, because he
Yeah.
never knew, he didn't know her as the loving kind mother.
Mm-hmm.
He just only, his primary emotion was still that of hurt, unforgiveness, and anger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, could it be that he probably did forgive her? Is just the fact that there was no when she called again, it was never any accountability. And
Right.
so if a person slaps me in the face, I can forgive you, but will I inhabit space with you? Will I begin to engage in another conflict resolution where you haven't shown any level of improvement of taking accountability for slapping me in my face the first time?
Hmm.
So before we move on, it was a couple of things that came to my mind, and I like to point these things out because they're relevant. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm gonna read like three scriptures real quick. This is Deuteronomy 28 and 54. It says, so that the man, these are the remember the covenant, or the covenant is, I think of it like this, before I read it, so I can give a little bit of context of what I'm about to say. This is the fruit. Like if somebody ends up in prison, right? You know that is the fruit of a judgment of the law. They're going to fall on either side. You don't have to know what they're convicted for. You don't have to know if they're actually innocent. All you know is that they were found guilty in the court of an American law. So when you see them behind bars, we understand that this was the fruit of a judgment. It's the same thing if somebody gets sued. It's the same thing if somebody's walking around with an ankle bracelet. That is always the fruit. So here it's the exact same thing. And this is whether you don't have to believe in the American law, right? But you can't go to court and say, I don't believe in it. Neither can you go to court and argue ignorance. Is never going to work for you. This is Deuteronomy 28 and 54. It says, so that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. Verse 56, it says, the tender and delicate woman among you, which would not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness, her eye shall be evil toward the husband of her bosom, and toward her son, and toward her daughter. So we see the fruit of these things, kind of panning out within our lives. And this is one story that's being told, but how many stories are there that reflect their own level of dynamic, right? And I'm gonna go to one more. This is Deuteronomy 6 and 7, because on both sides, right, we have the side where we're saying there was a rebelliousness against the parents, Exodus 20 and 12, when it says to honor your mother and father. This is Deuteronomy 6 and 7. It says, and thou shalt teach them diligently, talking about the ways of the covenant, the ways of the law, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. So we have it on both ends. The parent should be conditioning the children, so when they go out into the world, they're able to handle conflict. They're able to handle desires. They're able to handle impulse, right? So that we don't have to necessarily learn from a trial and error, which most of us do learn from trial and error. By the grace of the Most High, we're able to kind of see that. Now on the flip side, I have another clip that I want to play. I want to show this on the flip side. This is a video that was made by a Jewish person, but it's still the principle of everything is still there. Does anybody want to say anything or add to what I'm saying before we go into this clip? Okay, cool.
20-year-olds don't rent apartments. We buy buildings. You think I'm exaggerating? I'm not. Here's what actually happens. Your kid turns 18.
I'm gonna pause it for a second. I'm gonna let it load up right quick in hopes that and bring it back in hopes that it does not flicker on me. So let's start again.
You think I'm exaggerating? I'm not. Here's what actually happens. Your kid turns 18. You tell them to get a job and move out. When our kids turn 18, both sets of grandparents pool money for a down payment. You're teaching independence. We're teaching wealth building. Your 20-year-old is paying $1,500 a month in rent. Ours is collecting $1,500 a month from tenants. By 25, your kid has spent $90,000 on rent. Ours has $90,000 in equity. By 30, your kid is still renting. Ours owns 3 properties. This isn't privilege. It's multi-generational planning. Your family helps with college. Our family helps with assets. You're giving fish. We're teaching fishing and buying the lake. This is why Jewish families own real estate empires. Comment wealth, and I'll send you the wealth secret.
All right. So this is, I guess, it kind of shows something on the flip side. This is showing, you know, a cultural norm. It shows, like I said, a people who have long heritage, and for us, we still, to be honest with you, it sounds cliche, but to be honest with you, I feel like, and I believe that we're still doing a recovery job from being enslaved, and still trying to recover and find heritage and find our footing within ourselves. But apart from that, when looking at that clip, what are your thoughts on that? And I'm pretty sure, to some extent, you probably already come to think these things, but it probably just came along the line. What are your thoughts and opinions?
I know that I would like to see each generation, um, as each generation gets more knowledge,
Hmm.
it does not have to be a cookie cutter,
Hmm.
because when you learn better, you do better.
Right.
Okay. And things that we learned in school, you guys learn more now. Uh, and even your children, our grandchildren, are learning different skills and different strategies that we didn't have any idea of. So, you know, I believe that with uh, I I think with teaching our children at an early age, about business, about finances, about, how to build wealth.
Hmm.
It's on an individual basis, and then it grows, to a collective basis. I mean, as a collective group, then it
Hmm.
spreads from the family to the community. So, you know, just like my generation was different from my parents' generation, was different from my older siblings' generation. So I think that the same thing that the Jewish community is doing, it may not be 100% in the Black community, but it does exist, in our community as well.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for your feedback, man. What about you, PDJ?
I think that we're looking at a, it is cultural. And you're looking at cultural in the sense of they are, their generations go back 10 generations. They've had time
Hmm.
um, to get rooted into that wealth where in the beginning it may have been passing on a house. Then it's a house and something else and a bank account. Then it's a house and some insurance. And then we look at those people who were not enslaved in this country, and theirs was built off of the wealth of the enslaved. We look at the people who uh, they have certain privileges. In other words, let's look at it like this. I was
Hmm.
looking where, you know, I think somebody had gotten oh, I know who it was. It was, let me see, what's the senator from South Carolina, the brother from South Carolina, right? He
Hmm.
got into Congress when he was 52. his question is, why was he getting into Congress at 52? And he can look across the hall and they're getting into Congress at 25 and 26. So the way things are structured here, we have to put forth that a lot more effort to get to the same spot. You'll have somebody that's running a company. I know for a fact that there's a Lowe's where a 25-year-old is running it. He's the general manager.
Mm.
Whereas for us to get there as a people, we generally have to prove ourselves for the next 4 decades. And we're in our 40s and 50s when they decide to turn the keys over to us. So I think that wealth accumulation, and a lot of us don't have even the first person that has completed college.
Mm.
Whereas they have multiple generations of people that have completed college. They're already ahead of us. So we have to look at the beginning steps, actually. Like having a life insurance policy, like so that you can leave something to somebody. Having an education, because us starting off as 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds leaving our house to go start a life. And on the other hand, they are going to a college and they're going to spend the next 4 years of their life in college. They will come out of college and be my boss.
Mhm.
They have control over me as an employee of the company where they
Mhm.
just come out of college. So as far as wealth, I do know too that there are certain cultures where the parents buy the house for the son when they get married. And the
Mhm.
reason they do that is that the parents are setting them up on giving them a head start.
Right.
But those parents also had wealth, money, that they're able to do that. And so we are not there yet as a whole. We don't think that way. We don't even know of that way. We haven't been exposed to that. Um, we're hanging on for a lot of us, too many of us, even those that have the means, it's not enough. I
Yeah.
think that when we look at him who says, oh, we buy this, we buy that, we buy that. Yeah, certainly you can, you know, because they have that network too. We don't have a network.
Yeah.
We 100% don't have a network. So only network we have is getting together, to shield each other from um, abuse of authority. That's when we come together. Other than that, we do not have a network. So I don't have an uncle that hired me into his banking business or his jewelry store.
Yeah.
I don't have a cousin who would take care of this business for me, and I take my business to this person or build my house. I don't have that. And so that's the network that they have. Somebody's building their house, somebody's is taking care of the lawyering, somebody has a jewelry store, somebody has a this, they have a that. And that's when we're always looking at talking about how money circulates in a community so many times before it leaves.
Right.
Ours is not circulating,
Right. Correct.
it's leaving.
Correct. Correct. So I definitely agree with you. The on all points. When we even when we look at money circulation, if you look at it prior to before we got integrated, our dollar circulated quite a bit, and integration did a number on our businesses because we had our own bus lines, we had our own taxi lines, we had our own ice companies, and we were kind of forced to do that, and it really worked for our benefit. Once integration was fought so hard, and our money would at that time, according to the data, would circulate months even, and now it doesn't. It circulates about 6 hours. You understand? So going to T Renee, because I definitely want to hear what the crowd has to say. She says mentality and financial literacy matter. Definitely agree. In many Black and Brown communities, it wasn't taught because previous generations lacked access, especially with redlining, etc. Um, and she says it's a cycle, but we can change it. Absolutely. But what I would say is, and Brianna here, before I start talking, Brianna says, let's not forget modeling the mindset of I'll learn slash do better so that you can learn slash do better is more productive than the idea of teaching better so you can do better than me. All right. So yeah, so teaching these things, modeling these things, where I would go, just to as you all are talking, it triggers my thoughts.
I
And
can't hear you.
you can okay, can you hear me now? Okay. Nikita says she can hear me. Can you all hear me in the crowd? All right, and we'll work on Dad, exit out and come back in. Thank you. It looks like sometimes it happens like that on this on it. It'll malfunction on us, but that just lets us know, how people say that we're doing a good job. We touching on some things. While they are getting situated, can you help them? All right. Talking to my wife in the background so she can help get back on. Dad, can you hear me now? Here, I'll leave that up for him to be able to catch on, so we can continue with things, and everybody catch up. We talked about how other people are they're getting to this level, right? But in order for us, and this is my thought process and what I've been able to see through my lens, right, to be able to add to our community think tank. This is Deuteronomy 28:43. This is part of the curses. See, the thing is, if we can identify maybe what landed us here, we can also identify what can get us out. Deuteronomy 28:43 says, the stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. All right. So here it tells us that verse 44, it says, he shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes, which he commanded thee. And they shall be upon thee for a sign, for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. It says, because thou servest not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness of heart, for the abundance of all things. This just keeps going. So I'm just gonna flow with what I'm reading here. It says, therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck. And if you look at the old pictures of our people, they have the yoke of iron upon thy neck. Remember, I said that there was a standard. There's a standard that you can see and you can be able to look at, and you can see what's that? Okay. You can see where we fall at on that covenant standard. And that's, that's no matter what, So we can see that part of the solution is, I miss Simone. Part of the solution is what Simone has said here. I operate and network with family and friends now on referrals, but we need to start creating network system that will outlive us. Part of that is that. Part of that is what Mr. Playmaker is saying. I think the fact of not seeing things you want to achieve has affected us into our adult years, right? And I agree with all of these factions. So when we bring them all together, we can clearly see that something is happening that's beyond our control, and it's something really on a deeper spiritual level. This is my mother calling me now. Give me one moment, y'all. Let's see you. All right, she's gonna click the link and come back in. That was her calling. All right. So we cannot talk about this like it's only random modern dysfunction. The Torah spells out for us and told us what happens to a disobedient people. The children get touched, the house gets touched, the heritage gets interrupted, and then on top of that, thank you. That we start envying, or we start seeing where the oppressor and choosing his ways. So now we're not only wounded by the curse, we are also repeating the pattern of the curse. I want to go to one more place here as well, because I thought about it. This is Psalms 73, and I'm gonna read a little bit of it because it speaks to this. It says, "For I was envious at the foolish when I saw the prosperity of the wicked, for there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm. They are not in trouble as other men." Drop down to verse 7. So this is talking about people who have for generations built wealth. For generations, they've done well. They've passed it along, right? So let's see what David says about this and get him in on the unraveling the onion. Verse 7 says, "Their eyes stand out with fatness. They have more than heart could wish." Drop down to verse 12. It says, "Behold, these are the ungodly who prosper in the world. They increase in riches." Then the turn comes when he enters into understanding, right? So he's noticing that the people that are not the people, they're growing. Why? Because the scripture says the Lord chastises those who he loves. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, just as all things work together for good. These things work together for good for us when we're able to actually see them. This verse 16 and 17, it says, "When I thought to know this, it was too painful for me until I went into the sanctuary of Elohim. Then understood I therein." And so his conclusion is not to follow them, but to stay with the Most High. Verse 23, "Nevertheless, I am continually with thee." Verse 25 through 28, it says, and I'll end it here. It says, whom have I in heaven but thee? And there is none upon earth that I desire beside thee. But it is good for me to draw near to God. I have put my trust in the Lord God, that I may declare all thy works. So that is a psalm where the wicked seem to thrive, but the psalmist resolves it to stay near and serve. So their solution, what I bring to the table, because this is just my thought process, is not to say you have to adopt this thought process, but my thought process is that the only solution for this is to recognize that what got us here in the first place, and then start to do the opposite of it, which is keep the ways and keep the standard of the Most High. When we go to Deuteronomy 28 and verse 1, it says, "And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth." And then when you drop down to 15, it says, "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I have commanded thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. So everything that we are describing is that standard where we can see the prison and the foot monitor, and we can see that standard, and we can see how we've been found on that side, because being within the covenant is going to reflect either one or two ways. It's going to reflect with either within the blessings, or it's going to reflect within the cursings. And unfortunately, is reflecting within the curses. But we don't have to stay there. It's not the final solution. So that is my line of thought on this, and that is what I see lining perfectly with the scriptures that was written by Moses. There was no way he would be able to predict our situation in such a thing as here. So we at 110. We're getting ready to close out here and here shortly. Any closing remarks that okay. Yeah. Got it. So any closing remarks or anything that you all want to add and leave the people before we get ready to close everything out?
I just want to say that as we were talking about the culture, as we were talking about, the generation
Mhm.
just getting out of high school, moving out, and things like that, um, you know, it's a different mindset because, I would say a decade ago, the mindset was high school, college, job. But now, with all of the content creators and so many things are virtual, so many things are done um, electronically and
Mhm.
things like that, it's
Yeah.
giving the younger generation a lot more options. Um, but I still believe no matter what, um, that overall, that they, the young people or the parents would really make sure that at that age, the child is or realizing that they're not ready to deal with all that life is about to throw at them.
Right.
And then the other thing, some of the parents are, they outside just as much as the children are outside,
Right.
you know. But I think it's something good for us to bring to the forefront. Um, and I hope even the people that have been on here, you know, um, would be able to pass on to the people that we know and just encourage our younger people. Just stick in there a little while longer because now that it's, they think that they're adults, but they're not prepared. Like you said, how are they going to take care of themselves? You know, um, they're really not ready.
Right.
So I'm just hoping that this will have brought some encouragement and um, some clarity as well to know that we are better together and that the young people, they need a tribe, they need accountability, they need mentorship
Mhm.
to know that it's no hurry to get out there and be ready to operate as a full grown adult. It takes a lot of time and a lot of preparation. But I just want to tell you thank you for, the context and for bringing that to the forefront.
Yeah, and I think that's a great principle to be able to end on. And Dad, would you like to add any principle if somebody was watching this maybe they're younger, or maybe they're contemplating, what principle would you want to tell them so that they can leave with?
I would say that we live in a capitalist society. And the one thing they do not teach you in school is about capitalism, which has to do with your money, which has to do with interest, interest on credit cards, on interest on what is that? A mortgage, interest
Mm-hmm.
on all of these different things. And since we're going to there's a scripture that I always think of when I think about interest.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the borrower is slave to the lender. That
Mm-hmm.
credit card that we have in our pockets makes us slaves because we can have a $2,000 credit limit or a $2,000 that we owe on it. And if you look at your credit card statement, it says it's going to take you these many years to pay it back if you pay it back minimum. And a lot of people are paying back minimum, or they're
Mm-hmm.
still not paying back enough to pay it off you know in a short amount of time.
Right.
Learn about capitalism, learn about investing in stocks, learn about an IRA, learn about a 401k, learn about life insurance. These are things, this is capital. In a capitalist society, what we're learning is how to go work for the capitalists, how to be a good accountant, how to be a plumber, how to be a this, how to be a that. We're learning how to go work for the capitalists. The capitalists know how to get us to be good workers. That's what our schools are for. So,
Mm-hmm.
in the process of learning, learn about the foundation of this country, which is capitalism.
Right.
Capitalism is our uh, is our financial engine, and that's what we should be trying to try instead of us being the motor. Let's be the driver.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Excellent point. And Brianna said, once we identify the things that we don't know, that's big. And even right there, just to pause right there, that takes a level of humility, and it takes a level of diligence in order. So let me start that again. Once we identify the things that we don't know, we have enough information to begin seeking out that knowledge. Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Well, very well said. Very well said. So um definitely I agree with all of those points. In closing, I will definitely say that um I'll end with this one, because this is Joshua 1:8. This is what changed my life, and I think that it's important. I think that it's important to have those elements, but I think that when we look at our today's society, right, we have a society where we're becoming more educated, but we're still being caught within the snares of our bad decisions. So the women are becoming more educated than the men. Primarily, the men are being caught within, prison systems and so on and so forth. So I believe that there's a foundation that's even deeper than that those things will be able to take precedence and will be able to succeed. This is Joshua 1:8. It says, "This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success." So when I look at this, I see this as an absolute promise. And I wholeheartedly, 10,000% of my heart, believe that he's not going to make a deal and then compromise on the deal. So if we do his part, then there's a guarantee behind it. And this is the only place in the entire Bible where we can find the word success, at least KJV. There is not another place in it, and it's guaranteed. So tonight, we dealt with something deeper than just the question of whether somebody should move out at 18 or in the early 20s. We dealt with what is driving the move. Is it purpose, or is it appetite? Is it readiness, or is it rebellion against correction? Is it covenant order, or is it envy of the oppressor and imitation of his ways, which we see that scripture in Proverbs? Because Torah does not frame transition out of the home the way this world does, right? So when we look at the world, it's framed upon age, right? And even the example in the scriptures, Isaac stayed at home until he was 40 years old, until he was married, right? So age is not necessarily it, right? Is just order, maturation for us, and we should have some type of cultural norm to that. That's why I say, in my understanding, when I look at the book describes our condition. So if the book describes our condition before our condition exists, then it obviously has good counsel in it, and that's why I believe it wholeheartedly. Because Torah does not frame transition out of the home the way the world does. The world teaches young people to get out, find themselves, and live however they want, where the Torah teaches order, training, honor, restraint, and then righteous transition into building. A man leaves father and mother to cleave to his wife. That's covenant movement from one order house into another. When we look at the data, the numbers do not back the fantasy either. So the data here, it shows us, which I didn't get a chance to get into, but it shows us that a lot of within Black homes, a lot of people do stay home, but when they leave out, they're not financially stable, right? Which we talked about on here. They're not really ready. They don't have firm feet underneath them to be able to transition out of home. So it's not really being made with the right understanding, right? It shows that early independence without preparation is often exposure. How high rent, weak savings, unstable work, and thin margins make one bad decision or one hard month hit even harder, and the world script is failing on both the sides. It fails morally and it fails practically. But then we have deeper than that in modern culture, where the Torah already warned us in Deuteronomy 28 that the curses would touch the household, the children, and the inheritance. Jeremiah said we will discontinue from our heritage, which I read in Jeremiah 17:4, and Proverbs warned us not to envy the oppressor or choose his ways. So part of what we are dealing with is a people who lost the blueprint, then started copying the very pattern that helped break them. So that is why this conversation matters, because a house is supposed to do more than hold bodies. A house is supposed to build judgment. It's supposed to train sons and daughters to govern themselves, to honor, to work, to delay gratification, to resist folly, and to carry righteous order forward. The real issue was never just moving out. The real issue is whether the child was formed before the child stepped out, whether the parents built principle before the world built appetite, whether the young person is leaving to build or leaving to indulge. So the readiness is not age. Readiness is discipline, restraint, provision, purpose, on order. So, and that's the line I want to leave with you all tonight, is not to allow the world to define freedom for you. Freedom is not distance from correction. Freedom is not privacy for lust. Freedom is not rebellion dressed up as adulthood. True freedom is being governed enough to build without collapsing. And that is all I have for today. And with that being said, please like and subscribe. If you are still here and you're not subscribed to the Unraveling the Onion channel, please like and subscribe. Pop, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. And my mother's not here, but she dropped off. Her line kept dropping. So I appreciate both of you all for coming. And
Sure.
and you know, this video is gonna be here for a long time. So this is a evidence stamp for our future generations, our younger generations, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Dan. All right. Well, peace, you all. Shalom, and good night.
Good night. Dang.
Why is this hammer open like this? It's that's the piece mama. I'll go pick it up. Try covering it up, something flying around in it.